Okay, okay, okay. You go, Silver exclaimed happily. They were practically bouncing. That wasn't terribly unusual for them, all things considered. Silver moved like a ribbon being pulled through the air by a stick waved by a 6-year-old. They were an energetic creature. Ambrose held out his small hands and summoned up a pool of thick golden medium. It had a honey-like viscosity to it, slowly dripping from his hands as he held it there. Fidelity snorted. "Isn't that a little on the nose for a bee?" he asked. Ambrose blinked. "It did not have a nose, as a bee," he corrected. Fidelity grinned. It was hard to tell how much of the Tiefin's deadpan personality was genuine obtuseness or veiled humor, which added to the charm, all things considered. Ambrose turned and threw a glob of the stuff at Jean-Luc, who laughed and held up his hands defensively. Silver clapped and grinned before pointing to Malachite. Shiloh, who'd been sitting between them, scoffed. "You're skipping me?" he asked in mock offense. "I've seen you," Silver replied. "So have they." "I haven't," Malachite signed. Silver lifted their hand in defeat, but was smiling. The Tussanshee adored language, and Malachite's unique form of visual communication was particularly interesting. The mumble cookies let them all understand each other, but every language was different and conveyed ideas in different ways. Kite's had a breadth of nuance that the medium-infused translations caused to feel uniquely different from spoken words, and Silver savored the variety. Shiloh, vindicated, cast his hand out in a puff of powdered color, like spray paint leaving a can. It was mostly purple and red, and caught the outlines of webs in the air that were not actually present. Silver grinned and stuck a tongue out at the tipple, who acted mock offended. The two had some history together. Most of the muses who'd been in Inlist a while did. There weren't all that many of them. Shiloh pointed a finger at Malachite. He'd manifested a third hand to do so. That just sort of happened, from time to time. Shiloh typically presented with 2 arms, but would often gesture with 3 or 4 when it emphasized his point. Kite's brilliant green medium had the most vibrancy of the bunch. It had an opaqueness that looked almost like a comic book illustration. She was also the only one who seemed to produce it from nowhere, rather than from her body. It appeared in splashes and waves around her as though squeezed out of the very air, and was extremely expressive in its motion. Silver's, likewise, was rather fluidic while airborne. They danced it into being, rather than painting it like the others did. It also took forms, often fish or otters, splashing and flitting around as though swimming. They darted forth to mingle with kites. The silvery blue shapes in emerald green water danced in the air for a while before evaporating to a chorus of giggles. All right, amateurs." Fidelity stood up from his position on the log near the fire and cracked his knuckles. "Watch a pro." Shiloh smirked. Fidelity had been in Gallerie a week and was still wrestling with interior worries that he was some sort of demon. His bravado was intended to be disarming and covered for an ongoing struggle to figure out if he was or wasn't okay with his current situation. The Selu had a unique presentation amongst his manifestations, possessing 2 antlers instead of a single horn, sporting a bit more of a deer-like body. He was also extremely vibrant, as was his bright red and yellow medium. He cut it from the air like a wound with his horns and cast it outward like paint on a stick, spinning it into different shapes that popped like sparklers as it dusted away. He took an elaborate bow, to affectionate laughter. The lingering medium in the air was gently blown aside by a wind that carried sound. A voice, specifically, singing a melody almost like birdsong. It didn't have words, just sounds that evoked emotion. Evelyn was the only amongst the group that painted with song rather than color. It had a sort of palpable texture they could all feel and entered the space more like a presence, even if it wasn't expressly visible. When it solidified into shapes, it had a midnight black and deep blue shimmer. Aisha, who'd been watching, knew another vendor with similar aesthetics. He wasn't here, though. She'd known him less than a day, but missed him already. He'd been comforting. "Aisha?" Aisha blinked. Evelyn was looking at her curiously. She'd realized she'd been staring at the other bird. "Oh, I'm still getting the hang of this," she responded, flapping red-tipped wings. "Most of us are," Vince chimed in. He and Vincetta, the paired set of Hanchi, had gone first. It was remarkable to watch them weave. At once 1 person and 2, they tended to manifest as fully quadrupedal stone lions. When they painted, it was with swishes of their claws, kicking desert sand into the air in sections that seemed to join each other while each individually drew a part of it. They fell faster than the others, as though they had some specific weight to them. The others nodded. It was true. Most of the attending were very new to Gallerie, with only Silver and Shiloh representing veteranship. But in their short period they'd acclimated well. Even Jean-Luc, who wasn't amused himself, seemed relatively at ease here. Aisha had only been here a few days. They'd noticed her arrival and found her a day later. She'd fallen in a fireball from about 20,000 feet up. So far as they knew, her slip was still up there, hanging in the clouds. "Don't think about it," Shiloh coached. "It's not a push thing, it's a let-it-out thing. It's already in there, you just have to let the gates open a bit." "What's that look like, though?" she asked, uncertain how to really channel it. Silver smiled, and Aisha suddenly found herself holding a shimmery silver fish that flopped a few times before dusting away. You talk, Silver said. It's language. Your language. The stuff of you. Aisha thought back to the release she'd felt when she first arrived. The sundering of her skin and the vibrant feathers below. The heat. The light. Her light. She brought that out again, and fire danced off her arms. A beam of brilliant gold, like sunlight at dawn, poured from her mouth and seared through the sky to collective gasps. She breathed it out like smoke, and it danced along the edges of the leaves and the trees like a glint of reflections. There was silence, followed by cheering and applause, and the teasing jab of Fidelity mumbling, "Show off," before getting whapped in the arm by Evelyn's wing. The Brushwork chapter is the last chapter in the Muse book. That's the primary core rulebook for Gallerie, the one that every player is going to need to have in order to be able to build their characters and know the core mechanics of the game and all the stuff that kind of goes into everyday play, as opposed to Stagecraft, which is the book that everybody still needs to have access to, but not everybody is going to need all the time. It's like a one per table kind of thing. That also doubles as your monster manual, your DM's guide, and everything that kind of like handles niche rules that stuffing into the player's handbook would just make it needlessly large for content that isn't being used all the time. Brushwork is a thing that we've covered multiple times over. It's kind of the magic in the system. It also has a pretty large section of the book all by itself, has a ton of different sketches in it, sketches being the name of spells in this particular setting, and how you put them together and how you use them. So the rules for how they're used are right here. The rules for collaborating on them. You can actually work together if you're in close proximity to each other to combine strokes in order to make larger sketches. Rules for saturation. That's how you can actually boost your sketches so that they become more powerful or they change their form. And also things for medium maintenance, just sort of like the how medium itself is maintained and recovered in the game, which is covered in a few other spaces too, but it gets a little deeper in here. Right after this one is the sketchbook chapter, which doesn't actually have an individual story because all it is an archive of all the sketches in the game. But that shows you the different strokes, just kind of how they're shaped. And this is not a thing that you need to know as a player. It's just kind of flavoring as we're working into illustrations and stuff. You may see these showing up as to indicate different things. There's actually some in the front of this book. What you're looking at right now is the newly formatted version of the book that now has some background art in it and a few various other assets. So you're starting to see how it's coming together. Big long list of how the sketches are arranged and the combinations that are used to make them. It's arranged both by the schools, so whether or not they're coming from a certain school. Romanticism, Cubism, Deco, Minimalism, Nouveau, and Fundamentals are the schools in here. There's a whole lore set behind them. They are not actually directly related to schools of painting. They're kind of like borrowed terms that people in Gallerie had used because they had found associations while they were putting them together. So there's a bit of taking of these terms and reapplying them to a new location within the context of the history of the world that they're in. They're also arranged alphabetically over here, depending on which one you would like to kind of work with. The reason they're in school form over here is because in order to paint a sketch, you need to know the individual strokes that are in it. And arranging them in school form makes it easy to search by strokes you know. There is also a nice Excel document that I've put together that allows you to put in what strokes you know, and it will tell you what sketches that you can paint. And that will be made available to everybody. There'll be a link actually in this book, a little QR code. Unfortunately, due to the nature of the internet, I can't promise that will always exist. But at the start of this book, it will. and indefinitely, as long as I can keep it existing, it will. It's just, we live in a mercurial world. So hopefully that sticks around forever. It is not, of course, essential. It just kind of makes things a little faster. But you can also do the innovation process, which is talked about in here, which is a fun sort of downtime activity, so that you can see what you can paint both individually and as a team, because you can all combine your strokes to make ever more powerful sketches. And then all of them are listed out here, including the little glyphs that put them together, so that you can kind of, if you're illustrating, if you're doing comics, if you're doing anything with your characters, you sort of know what forms they're making in order to make these things take place. Just visualizations of each one. Each of these are different spells and abilities that you can use. They vary from changing your environment to doing direct damage as you get to more powerful ones, to causing things like, time and space to change. There's a huge array of different abilities that are within this section alone. And it makes for a very interesting and varied method of gaining magic because it's not assured. You're not guaranteed to get the same strokes in every game, and your party is going to get a whole lot of different ones too. So even though everybody in Gallery is capable of painting and capable of using different brushwork, the brushwork that you're going to have available to you will vary from game to game. They're not assured one way or another, and they're not required in order to like be powerful or anything like that. You're going to be gaining strokes at a regular rate. As soon as you gain a certain number of them, you're going to be able to access powerful sketches that are available. So you're going to have some array of this menu available in every game, but the exact ones you'll have will vary, and that will drive your story as well. The last part of this section here is just the character sheets as well as like progression records. And that brings us down to the bottom of the book. At the end of Gallery Muse, we're currently at 258 pages. That's not including credits and any other final formatting that might take place. But this is your primary tome in a nutshell. From here, we have Gallery Stagecraft, which is the whole other book that I'll go into as well, so that you can kind of see what's hanging out in there.